Yeah. So I think that's it. Charles, you can start.
Thank you very much. And it's gonna take an hour and a half, and then I go back to my madness. So yeah, thanks for the invitation. I was chatting to a couple of you last week, and actually even before that, a number of guys had reached out on via Slack, just asking about transitioning to PM. Actually, more than 5 people. So yeah, I thought it would be nice to kind of just cover it as a workshop, a discussion. My slides are a bit boring, but I will try and make them as exciting as possible. Yeah, so I know most of you, or some of you from Mandela. If all of you could turn on your cameras, at least I can recognize some faces. So I'll just start off with a bit of introduction. I'm 33, turning 34 sometime this year. Married with 2 kids who are hopefully asleep right now. I'm into, out of all those couple of things, photography I'd say is the most interesting for me. I try and do it at least every day or every week when I can. Though with this coronavirus thing, you can't leave the house. That's fine. I also do a bit of drawing on an iPad, portrait drawing. Cars, I've rebuilt some old cars. I did my first one about the time I was at Andela. Then the second one I started about 3 months ago. It's an old Land Rover Discovery one. Yeah, can talk about that later. So yeah, I'll just jump into it. So who is a PM? There are so many definitions about who a PM is, and hopefully by the end of this session, we'll get to demystify what being a PM is like. So more or less, you're the driver of a product. A product can be anything. It can be something software, it can be hardware, but the person who basically decides the growth or the life cycle of that product is defined as a product manager. You basically think about how you're going to get more customers to your product, thinking about strategy on things like commercialization, assuming you're not doing it for charity, you want people to pay for a service in exchange for the value that you're giving. So whatever product it is that is providing value, and whoever is driving this product is considered a product manager. And there's so many cases where, let's say you've you joined a company as a PM, but then you find that let's say the co-founder or founder who started the product, how do you differentiate the two? So they would be defined as the product owner, ideally because they're the ones who came up with this idea or came up with the product itself. And at some point during the growth of the company or the startup, they decided to get somebody full-time who would drive the product. With this role, I'm sure some of you have read, it's a KYM. I'm assuming all of us are Kenyans. It's a KYM role. You do a bit of everything, to be honest. And also you interact with almost everyone across the ecosystem of this product, whether it's internally, talking to people like sales, marketing. So think of it as being like the CEO of a product, and whatever happens to the product, ultimately you're responsible. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah, so these are some of the guys you interact with a lot. Particularly, like, let's say, for instance, for myself, the last time I spoke to an investor, engineering, product and design, data, everything here except finance and ops was today morning. So there's a lot of talking, a lot of conversation involved in this role. Um, and we'll talk about what before you decide to transition. I'm assuming most of you here are devs. What what is that like? It's a big commitment. Being able to say, hey, I'm transitioning or not doing code anymore to product management, and I'll touch on that. Next slide, please. So I've worked for a couple of companies. So my transition happened about 2014. I was hired at Checky and Brighter Monday as an engineering manager, and I was basically helping the team set up proper structures with regards to working agile, introducing things you're used to like Scrum and all of those fancy things. And it happened that the product manager at that time was leaving the company or leaving the country, and I was asked to step in. So in a way, it sort of happened by chance or accidentally, if I may define it that way. And yeah, I kind of like said, hey, let me try it out. And by this time, like I felt like I wouldn't say I was like tired of coding. I mean, I still code once in a while, like let's say every week or two. But I was always thinking about how can I how can I make an impact with regards to this vision of the product, the direction of the product. And I'll talk a bit about how product and other teams work together. So I wanted more than just writing code. And don't get me wrong, there are people who write code for 20, 30, 40 years plus, and that's their thing. There are people who say, hey, I'm tired of code. Maybe I want to step up the ladders. I want to try something new. And it's fine for them. So don't feel there's a lot of pressure. I know, like with engineering kind of groups or communities, when you tell somebody, hey, I'm kind of tired of code, and they're like, what? Are you crazy? Or they feel like you're not passionate enough. So don't feel pressure if sometimes you feel like, hey, I don't feel like coding and I want to try something new. So, and this is exactly what happened to me. So at this time at Brighter Monday, like I switched completely. Even most of a bit of like consultancy work I did before, like I stopped coding completely. And one of the reasons why I stopped completely was because of the time involved with being a product manager. So for Checky, so initially it was both Checky and Better Monday. Then I moved to Checky full time as a product manager. I was handling about 10 markets in Africa. Each of these markets had like a CEO and a whole operations team, sales team. So they were acting as my clients in a way. It was tough. It wasn't easy. Just because everyone has like their own demands on, hey, I want this product, I want to monetize this. I don't want my customers to pay. Each market was very unique in its own right. But it was a good challenge for me. I usually tell people that if you're 8 to 5, whether you're hired or you're self-employed, isn't challenging enough, maybe you should look for something more challenging. And this for me kind of fed me that urge to take it on aggressively. Yeah. So I left Jackie, took like probably about a 3 month break before I joined Andela. I joined Andela as a technical product manager for what used to be called platform team. So I was working with a bunch of you guys. I hope you're here. Just basically looking at what are some of the infrastructure needs that Andela needed to support the other teams like Pulse, AIS. I know they're no longer there, at least I think so. So Lisby used to call us, hey, you're the AWS of Andela. So it was quite technical. Also very challenging because Andela is one of the few companies I worked for where the business was growing at a very, very rapid rate, and tech was struggling to keep up. And it's actually one of the challenges that I kind of saw it being like a common thing happening in other businesses, where the business makes decisions very rapidly, and they're like, hey, we need to change this. But then the agility of that tech can't keep up. And that's something that we faced quite a lot. In some ways, we succeeded. In some ways, we learned from our failures. But I really enjoyed that. Then after Andela, I joined a startup called Quara. That's where I think Austin still is. So Quara is a cloud-based core banking platform, fully cloud hosted on AWS, and a lot of banks in Europe, in the States, already moving to cloud-based infrastructure, 100%. So when you see banks like KCB kind of boast about the billions of shillings they've spent on archaic platforms, they'll be in for a rude shock in the next couple of years, because banks are now starting to see that it doesn't make sense buying a server that you can actually see. It doesn't make sense kind of investing a lot of money in, uh, in this kind of traditional infrastructure. Yeah. So about a year in Quora, I got an opportunity to join Longhorn Publishers, and it was more of like I'd call it an opportunity of a lifetime. I wouldn't have. There's no way I would have gotten this role. Probably after a couple of years as a PM. So what I do at Longhorn Publishers, I head the digital publishing team. Um, Most of you are aware that traditional publishing as a business is dying at a very fast rate, especially now that a lot of schools are closed, kids are learning from home, so they're relying on digital platforms to do that. So I had this unit of the business at Longhorn, kind of as a as a way into the future of the business. So I have a product team, I have an engineering team, I have a team that does UX content. Yeah, so we're more or less like building a lot of the old software from scratch, and looking at how we can build like Africa-wide or global products that serve education needs of learners. Yeah. Next slide. So my day, just to give you an idea of what my day is like. For me, the most important thing I do every day, Monday to Friday, without fail, is prioritization. Things change so fast. Competitors come in overnight, or kind of market conditions that kind of interrupt or more or less force you to change a few things here and there. Always happen. And prioritization is quite key for me because it aligns the rest of my team and the business with what is the most important thing that should be done today, as well as that in one important thing or a couple of important things what kind of an impact do they have to the business. So there are ways you kind of measure this impact. The certain, and we borrow this a lot from the way we used to prioritize at Andela. So you look at what are the business KPIs that would be impacted by whatever task that you're doing, and what's the measure of that impact. So as an example, any classic business, revenue is a big thing. So if there's a feature that is affecting revenue both negatively and positively, it's probably going to be ranked quite high, especially negatively, because if, let's say, for some reason there's a bug on your shopping cart, people are not able to check out, you're losing money because of that bug. So prioritization is quite key. I use Trello a lot. I have like probably 20 something boards I look at. And especially because of my, as a PM, one of the hats that is included as a PM is you're also a project manager. And as a project manager, I have this very strong belief that if it doesn't exist in Trello, it doesn't exist in my world. So somebody will come and say, hey, I've been working on this, and I'll be like, stop there, show me the card on Trello. If you've not spec'd it out, if you've not thought it through, if you've not done your prioritization or what you think it should be prioritized against, then for me that's not a priority, because it's introducing scope creep, which is something probably most of you have experienced. So no matter what task anyone is doing, I have, my team is about 13, 14 people. Like I can tell you what every one of them is doing on Trello right now. So, and it's just good practice to, as a way of good project management, stuff doesn't get lost. Even for myself personally, I have my own Trello board, which I have to kind of keep up to date with. Then a lot of conversations with different people across the business, internally, externally. Typically, I'd spend maybe 3 or 4 hours on Skype calls or phone calls, Zoom, Slack, whichever is comfortable. There are days when like I spend the entire day on phone. Like I remember when last week, yeah, there was a day I spent like 7 to probably 8 p.m. Didn't have lunch, just probably in between calls, and that's expected as a PM. There are times when your day will get like really busy. So things like being able to delegate to other people, being able to kind of trust somebody else will complete something else that you can't put your attention to. It's really important. Then the other thing that's quite key, just looking at data. We live in a world where data is trusted more than gut feeling, because it's been proven that data is reliable over and over. I always give the example of Amazon. There's a reason why they know what you're about to purchase before you even think of purchasing it, because of data. And this data comes from the ecosystem of different products. And even in some cases, you might not be using one of their products, but they are able to profile you based on other factors. And in an environment where, as a PM, you're expected to be making a lot of decisions, some very difficult decisions, data is your one asset that won't fail you, because in most cases, whatever the data says ends up being true. And even at Andela, we used to kind of emphasize, as we were, so the product team every month or so used to justify why certain initiatives needed to be done, and if you didn't have data to back up your project, then it wouldn't even be considered. So just making it kind of like a daily habit that, hey, you must look at data all the time, every time. So yeah, then a bit of the others are just looking at what competitors are doing, keeping an eye on who are the new guys into your space, market research on existing competitors, market environments, so many different things. And documentation, as boring as it is, it's something that you can't run away from as a PM. So next slide, please. So as you think about whether you want to switch to PM, I would say it's not an overnight decision. It takes, like, it's literally shifting. It's like shifting career to a totally different thing. While yes, you might be interacting with a PM on a day-to-day basis, I think it's important that you identify what's motivating you to switch, and being able to kind of trust that you're making the right decision. I mean, I know a couple of people who transitioned to PM only for them, what, maybe 3-6 months down the line, they're like, hey, this is not for me, and they just went back to coding. So just think about your motivation. What's really motivating you, and being at peace with the fact that you want to transition. I mean, sometimes it's normal to feel a bit of guilt, a bit of uneasiness when you're transitioning, which is expected. But it's something that I would say you need to think about it a lot. Yeah. Then there are different types of PMs. There are PMs who are more focused on like growth hacking. There are PMs who are like, let's say, platform or kind of just around the actual use of the product itself. The PMs who lean towards digital marketing, and I'm sure if you look at the different types of PM, you find quite a number. So it also helps as you're going through this transition. Of course, you'll be looking at what are available jobs out there. The job description of whatever PM role must align to what you're interested in. Yeah. Just even to give you an idea of what being a PM would be like, it would be nice to shadow a PM if you know one. Just ask them like, hey, I just want to have an idea of what your life in a day or in a week or a month is, and your work will just to be observing and looking at how exactly they do their stuff, what challenges they face, and so on and so forth. And also joining a bunch of PM communities. There's so many out there that we have recommended at the end of the slide. So this just gives you enough information for you to be able to, at some point, make a decision and say, hey, I'm ready to jump to the PM world. And yeah, next slide, please. So I thought about like what are one of the ways you can transition. The first and most obvious one for me is first understand the product process, and this is something you can look at. So basically, from your inception stage all the way to like a mature product, and until when you sunset the product, and so on and so forth. Understand that first. It's very. I had trouble with this when I transitioned because I was always thinking like a dev. I was always thinking about solution first and not really thinking about the problem. Remember also, as a developer, as a software engineer, you're required to build solutions based on a product spec. So in a way, some of the product or customer related problems have already been scoped out, have already been defined. And now your part of that puzzle is to come up with a solution that addresses that problem. But as a PM, now you're expected to surface these problems. And even it's considered a very, it should be something that becomes a habit. Like you'll see something and immediately you want to kind of understand the problem further, and that's why like you need to talk to customers a lot. You need to talk to different shareholders a lot, just for you to have that very clear understanding of the problem. Yeah, so once you've had that understanding, the next easiest thing is be a PM for your own product. So come up with an idea or product that you feel is providing value to people, and and the go through the product process. Go through the product process with your own product, and kind of learn through that experience, and be able to in a way have a taste of what it is like being a PM, before you actually make that jump. And this is a really easy way to start, or a good way to start. Even if your product won't like be launched, at least you can go through that process, if you're a PM of your own product. Then next, if you if you're working with a PM in your organization, just help them out. PMs always are always busy. I've never met a PM who doesn't have like a ton of stuff they need to finish, and they would really appreciate if you offered to help. Just as long as you understand what exactly needs to be done, and being able to set aside time from your normal dev hours to be able to execute this and learn from that. The other way is, as a dev, you can think of a feature that is needed by your customers, and come up with a concept for that feature. Defend that feature and say, hey, I came up with this feature. I think these are the benefits. And don't just hand it over to the product team, but actually run with it, and own it. Yeah. Then the other way is, for some people, if you transition to a technical PM, uh, it it could be easier. Could be easier. So I think for me, like let's say at Andela, as a technical PM, while yes, I was a PM before, and for me, I was really curious, like, hey, what would it take for me to become a technical PM and work with like an architecture kind of based team. So this is another way for you to transition. Um, Next slide. So a number of like do's and don'ts. Let me start with the don'ts. If you're going to commit to becoming a PM, like fully commit. I wouldn't encourage one to, let's say, have your mind kind of in the middle. So if you're committing, your mind, your energy, you need to be focused on it, because there's a whole ecosystem that is relying on you as a PM to deliver value from this product. Then, especially for if you're coming from a dev background, let engineers do their stuff. Yes, you might have a few ideas here and there in terms of how they can, let's say, implement a bunch of like technical stuff, but let them do the stuff. You'll find yourself very easily like telling the engineer, like, hey, maybe try this library or whatever it is. Just let them do their part, and I'll be a lot of peace. Then you'll be making a lot of decisions, and part of this decision making means that not everyone will agree with you. Just get used to it. It's not no hard feelings about it, but if you make a decision, stick to it. If you later on you realize that you made a wrong decision, acknowledge it as fast as you can, and move on. Learn from it and move on. Yeah. Then lastly, you'll get a lot of requests from different stakeholders asking for different features or some prioritization for them. So ultimately, because you make the final decision, you don't have to kind of agree to everything. Of course, whatever you agree to trickles down to your team, and just getting used to saying no, of course, with reason, um, as part of being a PM. But, usually joke like as a PM, your default answer should be no, whatever the case is, um, until you've answered the why more than 10 times. So do's, patience, unlike devs where a solution is implemented, let me say almost immediately, and you see the outcome of that. With being a PM, that outcome takes a long time. So let's say if a feature was implemented today, you'll probably find out the performance of that feature after a good number of people have used it, or after a month or two. So there's a lot of patience in that. Then just aligning to your organization's strategic direction. Where is the business heading to? If you're not aligned with that, then you're in the wrong job. And whatever you do will not be part of that strategic direction. Number three, talk to everyone, like literally everyone. If even if like your company is like 1,000 people plus, set some time aside to talk to your customer, talk to different stakeholders. Yeah. Then I mentioned about like that engineering mindset, always thinking about, hey, I'll do it this way, solution oriented. With PMs, you start from the problem. If you haven't defined the problem, don't even bother writing a single piece of code or sketching any kind of design, whatever it is. Think about the problem until like you fully understand. Sometimes it takes time to understand the problem. You need data. Some of that information you kind of need to let it soak in until you kind of have full understanding of it. Then lastly, ask why 10 times until you get to the root of the problem. Yeah. Yeah, so challenges, I mentioned some of these. You won't agree with everyone. Learning how to play politics or deal with politics, that's normal. Then having a very, very good working relationship with your core teams being engineering, product, design, um, and the other secondary teams beyond that. But these three, these three guys, like just whatever, if you're in a team where you're not comfortable with one of these people, it's going to be very hard. Next, just over communicate. Even if I remember Edwin used to tell me, like, over communicate until somebody tells you, no, it's enough, or tone down on the amount of communication you're doing. But it always ends up positive if you over communicate. Then, yeah, using data to make decisions. It's the one thing that will have your back. If something were to happen and a decision you made backfired, in a way, you can kind of say, and which is true, that hey, you made the decision based on an indication on data. Yeah. Then next, in terms of managing your own time, in terms of like personal time, work time. So the times where possible, after 5 p.m., the next time I'm opening my laptop is 7 a.m. in the morning. So this work can get overwhelming. It can consume you. So you have to deliberately set time aside for your family, for your hobbies, for whatever it is that is not work related. Then lastly, yeah, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Like making mistakes, you should see it as a way of learning from these mistakes. And as long as you don't repeat that mistake, learn from it, and move on as quickly as possible. I've seen guys get so guilty about mistakes that they've done, and it actually hinders them from actually doing their work. So if you make a mistake, just acknowledge. Don't be afraid to kind of tell your team, tell your boss, tell your people, hey, I made a mistake. This is what I've learned from it, and yeah, it won't happen again. Making mistakes it's something that you must get used to, because in a way, there are certain things that you don't have information on or context of, and you're bound to make a mistake, and it's not your fault. But the sooner you are used to it, as long as you don't repeat the mistake. Yeah, then lastly, just a bunch of resources I've used for a few years. I'd say Product Manager HQ is probably the best I've seen. Join the Slack channel, go to the website, pay for the subscription. It's quite useful. Product School, they have quite a number of good courses as well, and even just the discussions on their Slack channels are quite nice. Then Mind the Product, I follow them on YouTube. They're quite nice. They have a number of discussions around what it takes being a product manager. The rest are podcasts I'd recommend: Masters of Skill and Chini ya Maji podcast, though it borderlines on like entrepreneurship, but also you get to see how people build different products and grew them. Also how we built this. So set time aside to learn. If you don't learn from other people, if you don't set time aside, just the same way you set time aside to learn code, you must set time aside to learn how to develop your craft as a PM. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm sure there are one or two questions you can answer. I know we had set an hour and a half, so I'm available for the next 57 minutes.
Okay. Snaps for Charles for an amazing talk. So we'll go straight into the Q&A. If anyone missed this, please write your questions on the slido.com link, and the event code is 711. Let me share my screen so that everyone can see it. 2 minutes. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So that's the link and that's the event code, and you can put all your questions there. So fast.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Fast
What
by
is a KYM?
Anonymous. What is a KYM?
I'm guessing you're not Kenyan. In short, you're the errand guy. Like you do a bit of everything. If floor needs to be swept, sweep it. If you need to go meet somebody on behalf of your boss, if you need to patch some code, if you have the skill. So just expect to do a bit of everything, because as the owner of the product, if your team tells you, hey, we don't have somebody to do a certain task and it will take time to get that somebody, then if you have the skill, just do it yourself. Yeah.
Charles, what's KYM in full?
It's I'll just Google it. It's cute.
Okay.
It's a cute term, but yeah.
The next question is by Anonymous. How do you, as a PM, handle a demotivated team, especially after missing a deadline or getting a bad review on the progress you thought was amazing?
Yeah, it's a really nice question. It's very wow, deadlines. So part of getting used to making mistakes involves getting used to missing deadlines. And yes, missing deadlines is bound to happen. But the question is, how do you communicate before the deadline? Don't wait until the day of to kind of say, hey, we're not going to make it. The moment you realize that there's a problem and something is going to block your team from getting to that meeting that deadline, the best thing you can do is just tell everyone, like, hey, stop what you're doing. Something has come up that's really important that's going to affect our deadline. Communicate it to different stakeholders. That way, you're seen as kind of like a transparent, or your way of work is being transparent and open. There's nothing to hide, and and it will be acceptable if that deadline will be moved because you have given due time and explanation. And of course, not just say, hey, we're going to be late, but provide a solution and say, we're extending this deadline by a month because of these reasons. This is what is going to be affected, and owning that decision. Yeah.
Awesome. For Hoslack, I think it's more of a comment than a question. For banks in Kenya, there are laws that prevent financial data from being hosted abroad, leading to archaic systems since there are no cloud data centers here. So, Hoslack, is this a question or a comment?
Hello, it's a comment.
I can bet you 5,000. I can bet you 5,000 Bob right now. There's no such law.
Yeah.
If you can show me a law that says this, I'll give you 5,000 Bob.
Yeah, I've just read a paper right now. A paper written in the university e-repository that banks are being monitored in a way that even M-Pesa was requested to bring their data back to Kenya. I can send you the link right now. It has been listed on the repository.
Of the law that was enacted, or the paper.
Yeah, the paper that talks about that.
Yeah. So as far as I know, and like for Quora, most of that data is, at least from what I know, is not being hosted locally. There's no such law that requires financial institutions to host data locally. However, it's something that is forcefully encouraged by the central bank just because of monitoring. Yeah, but I mean, there are pros and cons to it. But with regards to, is there a law that says financial institutions must host data locally? Absolutely not. Yeah.
So they have been forced, but there's no law.
Yeah, there's no law, but even there are things that you kind of be arm twisted too, sadly. There are guys who've managed to go their way out of it. There are guys who haven't. There are guys who don't even know that there's no law. So just because they've been told, hey, must host the data locally, they agree to it. Yeah, but as far as I know, there's no law.
So we'll move on. Anonymous asks, has experience as a dev provided you with an advantage? Will your experience be the same if you hadn't started as a developer?
Yes, very huge advantage. One of the things that a lot of non-technical PMs struggle with is managing technical debt as part of their day-to-day activities. So technical debt is one of those things you cannot ignore and say, hey, we'll do it next year. And unfortunately, it's the engineering team that will suffer at most the more this technical debt piles up. And also at the same time, it's not realistic to completely finish, quote unquote, technical debt. So I remember at Checky and at Andela, I had to sit down with different teams, like engineering leads, and tell them, hey, I noticed you haven't included, I have this rule of, hey, every sprint must have at least 20 to 25% addressing technical debt. And it's part of sprint planning. So for me, I would say, or as a dev, or former dev, you'll have an upper hand because you have a more technical understanding of this technical debt, as opposed to somebody who has no idea that migrations need to be run, or Ruby needs to be upgraded because we're on like 3 versions behind. Yeah, so it will definitely be an advantage.
Awesome. What would you say has been the most fulfilling thing since you transitioned from dev to PM? That one thing that makes you say it was worth it, assuming it was.
So that's seeing people talk about your product. So actually, an example that happened recently. So everyone is in like a family WhatsApp group. So the moment, let's say your aunt or your uncle posts something about your product without you telling them, they even have no idea that you work there, and they're telling everyone like, hey, use this. That's an indication that something is working. So just seeing somebody using your product without you kind of putting it in their face, and then getting value from that.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Anonymous again, is a master's degree a major factor in the PM world?
Absolutely not. It is not a factor in most tech roles, which is a good thing. With tech, once you learn how to teach yourself, then like everything is up to you. Just the same way with the like PM hasn't kind of matured to the point where like you can go get like certified. Yeah, there are a few people who are certifying, but they're hella expensive. But you learn through doing. You learn through experience. That's your number one teacher. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, the next question. How do you justify to future employers, potential investors or potential investors about products that you PM that fail during or after you stopped working on them?
Yeah, you explain why they failed. If you don't, I think the most important thing is knowing why they failed and being able to articulate what part you played to try and address that. If I'm a future employer or a potential investor and you can't explain to me why your product failed, very chances are that I'm not going to hire you. Yeah.
Okay. How important are papers or certifications? I think this has been answered. How do you justify that you can
Yeah.
PM for a first job?
So one very easy way, if you come up with your own product and have even 10 paying customers, or are able to show that, hey, I've developed my own product and this was my process, that's it. That's your easiest way to a job. That's the easiest way to a job. Yeah. Because you've shown that you're able to do it for your own product.
Yay. How do I?
Joy,
Yeah.
if you hover over the questions, I think you can mark them as answered so that they disappear
Oh,
right
wow.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Next question. How do I step up to act as a PM in a company that doesn't have one? And how do I balance being a PM and a dev?
So there are many companies that one have never heard about a PM, or has people who are actually PMs, but they don't call themselves or don't see themselves as PMs. So I would say one of the first things to do is educate your organization on why you need a PM, and part of that education that you're impacting or you're serving is justifying why you want to be that PM. So, and it's very common for especially your traditional businesses that have a bit of like technology or digital angle to it. it takes time before people understand what a PM does. So it's very common for guys to have like misconceptions, like, hey, you just build the products, you launch tomorrow, you get 1 million customers by Friday. When the reality is that never happens. So one, teach people, educate them, and be very strategic about it. And as you educate them, place yourself in a position that they will see, like, hey, we have the right guy internally for this.
Yay! So we're done with all the questions at slido.com. If anyone has any questions on the chat on just Jetsy, you can just ask to everyone or Charles. If no one has questions, let's like add snaps on the chat for his presentation and show that we are grateful for him taking his time to tell us how you can transition to being a PM from being a developer.
And thanks for hosting me. It's something I know, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of you have asked me in private about what that transition is like, and at least, like I usually tell people, if you're able to help somebody transition better, they'll have a better experience than you did. Like, there's nothing better than that. So yeah, if you're in the middle of a transition, you're thinking about it, just hit me up. Then yeah, I'll be able to answer a question or two.
Hey, quick question. So how do you handle, okay, just talk about maybe the pay scale that comes from dev to PM in, especially when you're working with, let's say an international company and then switching to a local company. How does the pay vary, as well as, do you want to start from an associate, product PM, or just move on to middle level, so just a product manager? How do you make such decisions? Yeah.
So I think one of the very important aspects you have to factor in or consider is that every country has a different cost of living in terms of you can have, let's say, a salaried person in Kenya and a salaried person in, let's say, Europe. Cost of living is different, and being able to acknowledge that first, I'd say, is the most important thing. Then also looking at what level are you joining at. So you might have a lot of experience coming in from the dev side, but you don't have to start from associate level. Though, frankly speaking, if especially, let's say, you're coming from, let's say, a company in the States, as an example, and you're transitioning to now a local company, don't expect to kind of get the exact same pay or higher just because of the market rate locally. Though the companies I know of that if you can define why you need to be paid above market rate, then yeah, they'll make it happen because they're seeing value that you're providing.
Okay, cool. So I get you. Thanks for answering that. My last question is, so there are graduates from who are in US and Sydney, or Australia, that get a chance to do this APM program. Like, they work at Google for a certain time as associates and move around the organizations. Can you talk about it and the way that shapes it and how we can create such environments locally as well as just applying for such, and do we even stand a chance?
Yeah, I'd say those programs, like the experience you get from those programs, chances are that you'll never get that kind of experience elsewhere, or very few companies will be able to offer you that experience. And what I was telling somebody had asked me a question last week. If you feel like you're getting more value in experience from that opportunity, and it means getting a pay cut or lower pay, then go for it. Because that experience, you can't equate it to money. You can't. And you'll probably, the next time you'll probably get that opportunity maybe in a few years. So if you miss out on that, yeah, I mean, and it's a personal decision at the end of the day, but I would say it's something just to critically think about. If the experience is like amazing and something that you'd not ordinarily get or come by, then I would say go for it.
Cool. Thanks for your time.
Cool.
Awesome. Does anyone have any more questions? In the meantime, you can be rating this talk on slido.com. I just started a live poll.
This is Stanley. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So sometimes if you're in a team that doesn't have a PM, you get to sort of just pick that up as you're being a dev and also being a PM. So my question is, how does success look like? How do you navigate that specifically in terms of, yeah, it could be your own personal project, but when you're having a team, how do you define success over time? That I'm actually hacking this in a good way before I actually take that up professionally, so to speak.
So earlier I spoke about being able to align to the business. So when it comes to like aligning to that business strategy or path, there are certain, let's say, KPIs that will be set, and success is as simple as you're being able to meet those KPIs, and you're being able to show the business that, hey, you're doing something that is helping that business grow. It's something that for me personally, it took a while to understand, especially coming from dev, where dev-related KPIs are kind of different. And for people who are able to switch that context of, let's say, somebody will look at how fast do you ship features to production, how fast do you resolve bugs, versus being able to say, like, hey, I've met like X number of KPIs. I've met like X number of KPIs in the last 1 year. So try as much as possible to align to the growth of the business, the KPIs of the business, and that will be a very clear indication of your success in that company. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Cool.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we have kept time. Unless, Daisy, did you have a question? Who was trying to speak? Then I cut them off by mistake. Okay. So I want to thank everyone who attended and thank Charles for preparing this talk for us. I'll invite anyone who wants to say something to come in right now. Maybe Mark or Shiko or Ryan or Jojo.
Thanks, Charles. It's been a very enlightening talk, and I hope we'll we'll be able to get another one like this soon.
Awesome, karibu.
Cool. So I think I'll just bring this to an end now. It was awesome seeing all you people and your beautiful faces. And for the people who joined on YouTube, thanks also. We will see you on the next Wednesday. So we'll be having this thing every first Wednesday of the month. So we'll see you next month on the first Wednesday. Cool. Bye, everyone.
Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.